Hola, ¿cómo estás? Espero que estés súper bien. This is Tamara Marie, host of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Now, before we jump into this episode, I wanted to let you know about a special opportunity that you're definitely going to want to take advantage of, especially if your goal is to become fluent in Spanish. For a limited time only, my team is opening the doors to listeners of the podcast to take advantage of a free language coaching session. Now, in this session, it's not just we're teaching you about verbs or grammar, but we're really going to do a deep dive into what are your goals for learning Spanish, assess where you are on your journey to fluency at the moment, and help you map out a 90-day plan for how you can get to fluency. So we are going to help you take your Spanish to the next level, whether you're afraid of speaking Spanish or you just get a little bit nervous when you're talking to native speakers, or maybe you've got some of the basics down, but you really know that you struggle with getting your Spanish to flow and your listening skills aren't up to par. Whatever it is, even if it is a specific grammar issue, we will help you map out how to tackle that. And normally these sessions do cost, so we are offering a few slots for free. There are limited spaces available and they'll only be open up through the end of the month. So make sure you sign up. Go to SpanishConSalsa.com/coach. That's SpanishConSalsa.com/coach to book your free language coaching session where we will help you map out a 90-day plan to get to Spanish fluency. Okay, let's get started with the episode.
Bienvenidos! Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast, the show for Spanish learners that love music, travel, and culture. Close your grammar textbooks, shut down the language apps, and open your ears to how Spanish is spoken in the real world. Let us show you how to go from beginner to bilingual. Here is your host, certified language coach, Tamara Marie.
Hola a todos y bienvenidos. Welcome to another episode of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to Netflix and chill in Espanol, okay? So I'm going to give you my 7 favorite Netflix shows that are in Spanish so you can binge watch and improve your listening comprehension at the same time. You might be surprised to find out that there's a ton of Spanish content on TV. You just have to know where to look. This goes beyond just watching the news in Spanish. You can find sports programming, children's programming, and of course, the telenovelas, the Spanish language soap operas that are often very dramatic and very popular in Latin America. So if you find yourself with some free time and you start to binge watch a show in Netflix, try one of these 7 shows. Now, before I get into my list, I do want to give you a quick tip. Now, there are a lot of shows that are on Netflix that actually are available in Spanish. So not only can you turn on the Spanish subtitles for a show that is in the English language, but some shows actually have the option to turn the audio to Spanish, so you can listen to a show in Spanish as well. Now, I found this to be very valuable, especially if it's a series that you've already binge watched in English, because you already know the characters, you already know the story. That frees you up to be able to pay attention to the language so you can actually get more exposure to Spanish by binge watching a show with the Spanish audio option turned on that you've already previously watched in English. I personally have found Spanish versions of the shows Breaking Bad as well as Black Mirror. Those are 2 of my favorite Netflix series, so I've gone back since then and watched them with the Spanish audio, and it's been pretty entertaining to hear the Spanish versions of some of those episodes. Now, one bit of caution on this. One thing you don't want to do is turn on the Spanish audio and also turn on the Spanish subtitles. Now, the reason for that is that you'll find that oftentimes, if not all the time, these will not match. So you'll be listening to the Spanish audio and you're reading the Spanish subtitles, but the words are not quite syncing up. And that's because for whatever reason, and I'm not quite sure why this is, but it looks like the studios have actually hired 2 separate companies. One to do the subtitles in Spanish, which is for a Spanish-speaking audience, and another to actually do the voiceovers or dub the episodes in Spanish. So whoever the actors are that are doing the voiceovers, they're reading from a completely different script than the person who actually translated and did the subtitles for the episode. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to listen to the Spanish audio, do it without the subtitles. And again, if it's a show that you've already watched in English, you should already know what's going on, and you really shouldn't need the subtitles anyway. So that's just a little tip if you want to binge watch your favorite English language shows with Spanish audio. Okay, so now let's get back to our list of Spanish language series that are on Netflix. The first show I'd recommend is the show Narcos. Now, unfortunately, this show is very stereotypical, and it is about drug traffickers from Colombia. The main character, who's actually Brazilian, which a lot of people don't know, he actually had to learn Spanish in order to play this role of Pablo Escobar. So it's all about what happened in Colombia during the rise of Pablo Escobar and the drug cartels. In later seasons, it also talks about the Cali cartel and how they took over after Escobar. Now, despite the subject matter, this is a really well-written show, and it's really interesting to watch. They do a good job of pulling you into the story, so you learn about all of the different players that were involved. Now, this show is really good for beginners because the narration is actually done in English, and there's only certain scenes of the show that appear in Spanish. And anytime there's a Spanish scene, there are subtitles that match what the speakers are saying because it was intended for an English-speaking audience. So this is a good way to get your feet wet if you're not ready to watch a show that's 100% in Spanish. So I definitely recommend you check out Narcos. Now, the second show I really enjoyed on Netflix is Ingobernable, and that stars Kate del Castillo. Ingobernable translates roughly to ungovernable, so something like unruly. And it's a political drama based in Mexico City. Now, Castillo actually plays the First Lady of Mexico, and in the first episode, she experiences a really shocking event, and she spends the rest of the series trying to reconcile that event. So I don't want to spoil it for you, so I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I promise you it'll have you hooked from the first episode. Now, because it's based in Mexico, you're going to be exposed to a lot of the Mexican accent and a lot of slang that's associated with Mexico. Now, for both Narcos and Ingobernable, I would definitely suggest that you keep the kids out of the room while you watch these shows. There is a lot of adult language in some of these episodes, but they are really good stories. So that is number 2. Now, the third show I recommend is a little bit quirky. It's actually called ¿Quién fue? Like, who was that? This series explores the lives of various historical figures, some very well-known figures. They tell them with these hilarious reenactments that are a little bit over the top and a little silly. But if you find history boring, this may be a way to sort of get you into history while you're practicing your Spanish. So it's good for a good laugh when you have some downtime. And I will say one of the episodes, just to give you a little flavor about how goofy it is, there's actually one episode about Ben Franklin, and it actually shows him, discovering lightning with a kite, and he's got like these ripped abs, and he's, bragging about all of his accomplishments. It's really a little bit silly. I definitely recommend it because the episodes are pretty short and it's good for a laugh. Now, a quick note for all of these, it really helps if you change the settings in your Netflix account to Spanish. So if you go log in actually on the computer to your Netflix account, actually go ahead and change the language so that it will default to the Spanish version for all of your shows. If you really want to commit to practicing Spanish while you watch Netflix, if you change the language to Spanish, you won't have to worry about constantly having to go back and select that Spanish audio option as you're binge watching the shows. So that can get a little frustrating. So I definitely recommend just changing your Netflix account settings to the Spanish language, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Now, my fourth recommendation also stars Kate del Castillo, and it's based on a book by the same name. So this series is called La Reina del Sur, or Queen of the South. It's a really interesting story. It's another one that'll grip you from the first episode, so definitely check that one out. The fifth series I recommend is called En Pocas Palabras, or In Not So Many Words. And this show covers different topics for each episode. So they talk about a little bit of everything, and they're usually pretty interesting topics. So they cover everything from cryptocurrency to fad dieting. So this is a good way to expand your vocabulary and be able to talk about different topics in Spanish. And the episodes are also pretty short. So if you're looking to increase your exposure to Spanish, but you don't have the stamina to watch an entire movie or a series, this can be a good series for you. Now, to make it easier for you to find all of these shows, I will actually link to all of them in the show notes, so you don't have to go searching on Netflix. I'll give you a link directly to each series so you know exactly how to find it. Okay, moving on to recommendation number 6. Recommendation number 6 is a classic Mexican telenovela called El Señor de los Cielos. And this is a very popular soap opera, so it's really hard to ignore this one. So definitely check it out if you want to be up to date with Latin American culture and you want to be familiar with a soap opera that almost everyone has seen. And unfortunately, this is another drug trafficking show, but it's about the post-Escobar era, okay? So a little stereotypical, but again, a lot of Latinos know the show, have watched it before, but this is a good one to watch so you won't feel left out if it comes up in conversation. Now, the last one I recommend, and this is actually both my most favorite series and the most challenging series. It's called Celia, and it's about Cuban singer Celia Cruz. Now, if you don't know who Celia Cruz is and you haven't heard her sing, you owe it to yourself to look her up right now and listen to her voice. She was really known for having a strong and beautiful voice, and she's very popular throughout Latin America. So the series really explores a lot of historical events as it relates to her life. So this show is really quite extensive. I believe there's about 80 episodes. So when you start watching this one, make sure you have some free time on your calendar. Now, what's good about this show is that it exposes you to the Cuban dialect of Spanish. But that's also what makes the show really challenging. The accent really may take some getting used to, and if you don't know any Cuban Spanish, some of the vocabulary might throw you off. And this is another one that if you watch it with the subtitles, they're not 100% accurate, so it can be a little bit tough to catch the language in this show. But if you're looking for a challenge and you want to learn more about Celia Cruz, I definitely recommend this one. Now, while this is available on Netflix, it originally aired on Telemundo. So if you want to actually watch the chapters with accurate subtitles, I recommend going to the Telemundo website. And again, I'll include a link in the show notes so you don't have to go searching for it. But you'll find if you watch it on the website, if you turn on the closed captioning, now this is not the subtitles in English, it's the closed captioning option, which is really for the hearing impaired in Spanish, you'll find that the words actually match up with what the speakers are saying, which again does not happen on Netflix. So I would definitely recommend if you're really interested in Cuban Spanish or in the life of Celia Cruz, or you just want to really improve your Spanish and get deeper into your study with this series, check out the Telemundo website, turn on the closed captions, and really sit and study line by line and scene by scene. Because I can tell you most people that have watched this series that are not native Spanish speakers have really relied on the English subtitles, and that really can take away from the experience of the show. So try to resist the temptation of reading the English subtitles because you're so captivated by the story, and try to take some time, slow it down, watch it with the closed captioning in Spanish, and see if you can really pick up what's being said. This is also a great series to discuss with your tutor. So if you have a tutor on italki, or if you're in the Spanish con Salsa community and you have access to one of our coaches, you can definitely take one of these episodes and review it with a tutor or a coach so that you can really understand some of the nuances in the language. Like I said, this one can be a challenge. So if you're at intermediate level or if you have any interest in Cuba, I definitely recommend this series. So those are my 7 favorite Spanish language shows that you should binge watch on Netflix right now. Just again, as a quick recap, the first show I recommended is the critically acclaimed Narcos, which is about the life of Pablo Escobar and the drug cartels in Colombia. The second show I recommended was Ingobernable, a political drama that follows the First Lady of Mexico. The third show I recommended was ¿Quién fue?, and that gives a comical look at some historical figures. The fourth show I recommended is La Reina del Sur, or The Queen of the South, another critically acclaimed series with a very interesting story. And a side note about this, I mentioned before that it's based on the book. That's another book that you can download from audible.com. So if you listen to the episode on recommended resources for intermediate Spanish learners, I mentioned audible.com, and one of the books that you can get is La Reina del Sur. And this book is available on that site. So that's another way to increase your exposure if you read the book and then watch the series, so you'll already have an idea about what's going on. I also recommended En Pocas Palabras, El Señor de los Cielos, And last but definitely not least, Celia. So go ahead and check out the show notes at learnspanishconsalsa.com/Netflix. And you'll get links to all of these series for your next binge watching session. That is it for this episode of Learn Spanish con Salsa. And as always, I would love to hear from you. If you watch one of these shows, tell me which one is your favorite, or if there's a show that's not on my list that you think I should add. Definitely go to the show notes page and comment. You can also reach us at Learn Spanish con Salsa on Instagram. And I'd love to hear about your favorite shows as well. So definitely reach out and don't hesitate to contact us. And as always, I hope you learned something in this episode that will take you one step closer on your journey from being a Spanish beginner to bilingual. Adios. This episode of Learn Spanish con Salsa is brought to you by our partner, italki, the effective, fastest way to become fluent in a foreign language. You'll make more progress with one-on-one lessons customized for your learning style and goals. You can take lessons from anywhere at a time that is convenient for you. Connect with people from around the world, learn the real language, and learn how people really speak. Get started today and get a free $10 credit with your first lesson purchase. Just visit go.italki.com/Spanish con Salsa. That's go.italki.com/Spanish con Salsa.
Thank you for listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast at learnspanishconsalsa.com.